Hi, Chris Duff over at Serious Land Capital, vacant land funding partner. So I promised a key land pricer update on the previous podcast. So huge kind of adjustments and updates and kind of changes that had to be made over the last week or so to kind of fill you in if you haven't been paying attention, or maybe you are just kind of hearing about this for the first time. We've been trying to develop this land pricer software over the last year plus at this point, with kind of progress being made in fits and starts. Most of the heavy lifting started in like August of last year, roughly. And, the goal was to kind of take our serious land capital underwriting process for being so accurate pricing land and having great results across the US and build that into a software form so that other land investors would be able to simply and accurately price land deals, so they wouldn't get trapped into potentially bad deals, stay in business for longer, move even faster within their own businesses. That was the goal coming out of this. And I know I've recently mentioned, hey, we had beta testers come in. The software was finally in a place where, okay, it could be fully tested, pricing was being summarized and so forth. So I had, a lot of some of the biggest names in the land space testing this product. And, while the idea itself is like, hey, there is promise inherent in this, and the pricing aspect seems to be mostly accurate, which is definitely a good sign considering the name of the software. It just wasn't fast enough. It was taking, there's a bit of a learning curve to use it. It was taking, 45 minutes to an hour plus to review a land deal, even when I dramatically updated the script to try to shorten it consistently, or in a really substantial manner. Like, it was still just taking too long, even within my own business. I wasn't routinely turning to use it as soon as it was available, reviewing land deals. My assistant, who really understands our process thoroughly, they were taking, upwards of an hour or so to review deals as well too. So like, it wasn't fitting the bill for what needed to be done. Like, the software was weighted too far towards accuracy of information versus fitting in with the workflow of people pricing land deals. And so that was a major misstep on my side, because I had already invested over $80,000 personally into building this out. And I had set a basically stop limit on myself roughly a year ago, saying, okay, I can budget like roughly 75K bootstrapped before it just gets unreasonable, to see whether I can build this out effectively and get some revenue traction, or going to have to really reconsider and back off. And my estimate from beta testing was that, okay, beta testing is going to take like maybe a couple weeks and maybe another 5 to 10K of engineering expenses to fix some bugs here and there, adjust things. And it became clear to me, from very, very trusted, experienced land investors who provided, deep notes and reviews, and really, put time into reviewing this. Again, I can't thank them enough for their trust here, and, belief in my own abilities to build something. Like, it wasn't going to fit within the workflow. Like, it wasn't going to get the usage. And, I was starting to have to estimate, hey, like, we're going to need to overhaul this software more significantly. Like, there's probably another 50 to 100K of engineering updates that probably need to be done to make this a lot faster. So that was putting me in a pretty tough spot earlier this week, because I was just regretting a lot where I should have been. First, I should have managed the costs better. There's a million things, and I was over delegating towards the technical experts that I was hiring to do this. I should have had, over the last couple months, I took a much deeper managerial role into confirming the progress and updating where we need to be accordingly. I should have been doing that much earlier on, and I should have been introducing initial user tests, even like really basic level ones, and even testing internally, like within my own business, more off the start, and seeing, okay, are we trending to where this is actually going to fit workflow. I didn't perceive that to be the most critical factor. Instead, I overweighted myself to like, hey, we're the best at pricing in the industry. So like, let's just take our process, throw it into a software. It doesn't really matter how long it takes because the accuracy is what matters. And that ultimately was the incorrect approach there, that, here we are having to pivot and adjust. Being in kind of this stuck place, and obviously, the economy is in a rough spot at the moment. I was taking a lot of Callan's teachings, and I went to, the pro version of ChatGPT, and, gave a super long contextual question, like, be, a top level board member, etc. I really try to provide a lot of context on like, what should I do here? Because I don't feel comfortable spending any more money on this, but the product is also not ready. Like, people expect the best from me. They expect the best from Serious Land Capital. Like, I'm not going to release something that doesn't fit that standard. And I'm going to need like a lot more work done on this product that just isn't going to be ready with some minor bug fixes. What's the process then? And, it asked me a whole bunch of other clarifying questions and so forth. And I couldn't believe how kind of clear the follow-up from ChatGPT. Like, it's just wild how good these LLMs, like every single week I'm having like a new kind of mind-blowing experience with AI, with how good it's becoming. And it just was some of the most key advice. I wish I'd consulted it much earlier. I know these models are getting better week by week, so it might not have been as handy. Something I should have been consulting with probably earlier. And really the key was just like, okay, yeah, you got to freeze dev spend. Just like, yeah, hey man, you tried to put your brain into the product here. That clearly wasn't like the right approach. You meet your users where they're at. Like, it's got to fit the workflow. Even your own team, even you, aren't utilizing it at the moment. So it's like, okay, it's way too long. We got to figure out, how do we get this to 10 minutes or less of property reviews, be way more efficient, and get like ballpark answers for the pricing here. More importantly, even beyond that, it's like, okay, really test that price point. Like, before we put any more potential effort into this, like, go back to some of your testers, go back to other trusted land investors, and some of you will be hearing from me over the coming days too, and like really test the price point. If this thing like really changes to where, okay, 10 minutes or less, fits within workflow, $100 a month for unlimited property reviews, is that going to fit? And even asking for prepayment for some folks, fully guaranteed, hey, if I can't deliver on this, you get refunded. Really confirming that before doing anything else. And so I was already getting some initial positive responses. Hey, I think that's reasonable to do. But then the next step was like, okay, this engineering piece still has to be done. So then it's a question of, okay, do you try, I've been working with an agency that have been paying a lot of cash over the past several months. Do you need to find a different technical partner who's willing to work for equity? Or do you figure out what the rough estimate is for the remaining engineering work to get the product ready for launch based on all the feedback you've gotten, so then you can get your day one customers in the door and start generating revenue, and then maybe raise a small round of 100, 250 grand or so from various angels and accelerators and so forth. I wasn't sure what the best approach was going to be there. I was probably leaning more towards just raising a small round. I feel like I would be able to do that pretty effectively. Like, I have a lot of skin in the game, invested a lot of money. We have a really successful business within the land space. We have day one customers ready to go and so forth. Like, we're not just entering into this space from nowhere, and a really deep understanding on how pricing works. That was the advantage there. And then I had a conversation with the main project manager at the agency who's been doing all this work. Obviously, they have the most info on how the code base is set up and all of that. We already have a built-in rapport. And I know I've remarked, there's been some issues in the past and so forth, mainly on communication. Resolved a lot of that more recently. And I, take that upon myself of just over delegating earlier on when I should have been having a firmer hand and a firmer grasp on being a manager on that side. And completely unexpected for me, the project manager was like, "Hey, we're open to considering working on this further, like from an equity position." And to me, that's like kind of best case scenario, because all of a sudden I can, shut off my dev spend. Like, I'm capped on personal financial expenses from this. Like, again, keeping my own word of like, okay, I'm at the limit of my risk tolerance for personal expenditures on this software. And it can get the engineers who already know this product more deeply, since they've already built the initial version, and figure out, okay, that's probably the fastest way to get to the next step. And where the project manager would consider, okay, even a possible CTO or fractional CTO type role with us. And he was like, okay, put a deck together. Like, let's have a brainstorming session, start figuring out the user feedback. What are the next steps need to be, so we can get this down to 10 minutes or less. So we already started having those meetings, and I threw a deck together. And like, that's so outside of my day-to-day, is like trying to figure out vesting schedules and what equity even might look like in a situation like this, in rev share and everything. So I went back to the ChatGPT, and we put together a deck within less than an hour, and had just incredible suggestions again on how to structure equity and so forth, and threw all that over. And it's not like firm or anything, but it's really trending into a good place. Because again, I think just being a leader, when you're looking for the right who's, and this is something ChatGPT was telling me, is like, hey man, you've been in a builder mode for too long. You got to be a CEO. You got to use leverage more effectively, and find more who's in a kind of more strategic manner. And that's always back to the Dan Sullivan thing, is like, as a leader, it's your job to figure out the what and the why, and the who's will figure out how to do that. So I've just kind of really embraced that, especially over the last couple of years. Like, hey, your results within your core business are really compelling, and you as a leader within that are also really compelling individuals. So people see that vision and want to be a part of it. And that is what now might set up to where I can completely eliminate my cash burn, get people to work for equity. Yeah, obviously giving up some ownership, but to me, okay, that's worth it if I can actually get this product off the ground here, and still work with the people who already understand this product the most. So clearly a lot was happening over this last week in the midst of like all the markets crashing and everything too. Like, it's been a kind of Wild West time, but I wanted to update you all where we're at. It's much to my regret. Again, I wish I could have delivered on this product based on like the original timeline at end of 2024. It just kept getting delayed. Now it's going to be delayed probably at least another few months. We're going to try to sprint as much as we can. And if the agency decides like they don't want to move forward with it, I'd say like we're probably 90% going to be there. I'm feeling, just based on already some of the initial conversations and work going on, I think we'll be able to work something out in a fair manner. But if I had to go raise outside and so forth, or find a different partner, like, I'll go do that. It's just going to take extra time to accomplish that. So it's going to be a few more months. But again, I'm not going to release anything. I promise you guys that won't both fit my own standards for my own business, as well as the industry as a whole. And a lot of lessons learned. Building the serious land capital business is just very different from land pricer's own set of problems and situations to deal with. Like, I literally 103 items probably that I would have done either much differently or somewhat differently over the last year or so. But here we are. Business is messy, business is hard. Like, it's no surprise. Things have to change on a week by week basis, and you got to roll with what comes up. Again, go back to my mentor, like Trevor McGregor, and everything. It's all about speed recovery. You can't get trapped in your own bad thoughts and all that for any longer than necessary. And I just have really embraced that and gotten a lot better about that over the last few months, especially, of like, okay, yeah, this sucks. Let's figure out a solution here and moving forward. A lot of people struggle with that. I used to struggle with that all the time, get stuck into dark spirals. And now I just feel like I'm able to bounce back, figure out the next step, and and move forward. So hopefully you guys are picking up some lessons from this. Obviously, it's vulnerable to talk about it. It's not an immediate win, that's for sure. I mean, I think there's some small wins now of moving things back in the right direction to solve. But again, another lesson, like I always say now, more recently, like, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. So even though I really wish it were kind of easier, like I have to remind myself, yeah, you just weren't good enough. Now you have to be better in order to get over this hurdle. Other people have done it before. If you believe in yourself, you can do it. You have the right resources, right relationships in place, figure it out. So that's where we're at. If you're looking for funding, seriousland.capital, land daily diligence on Mondays and Thursdays rather, cost review your land deals. Remember, April 17th, we're going to be doing a mini unconference. So if you're open to having a hot seat and being coached by multi-million dollar land investors to help you solve problems in your own business, please let me know. Those are going to fill up fast, I'm sure. And landpricer.ai, which I just talked about for quite a while here. With that, take care, everybody. Subscribe and share. Bye.